How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Beis, Daf 82 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, Daf Pei Beis is Mamash Gewalt. Mamash Gewalt, though I do have a feeling it's going to be a big one. It's just, as the well-known formula goes at this point, the longer it takes to learn or review whatever, the longer it tends to be. And it took me a long time to review it. But we'll see. But it's a give Mamash beautiful daf. Anyways, so the first section of today's daf, we wrap up shechita she'ena re'uya. Of course, we learned a Mishnah yesterday, which is dependent on discussions that we've been having for the past few days. We've seen the shechita of Reb Shimon since daf Pei already. The shechita of Reb Shimon with regard to shechita she'ena re'uya lo shma shechita. When you have a shechita that is unfit, that does not result in kosher meat. So that's a shechita she'ena re'uya. And says Reb Shimon, shechita she'ena re'uya lo shma shechita is not considered shechita bichlal. The Chacham disagree. They say shechita she'ena re'uya is considered nonetheless shechita. We saw a Mishnah yesterday with several examples of shechita she'ena re'uya and how that plays out in terms of the machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim. We are going to learn about two of those examples today, Para Aduma and Egla Arufa. Interesting Gemaras there. We then get to a new Mishnah, a small little Mishnah with just a few lines of Gemara about a mother and daughter cows owned by different yidden. What responsibilities do, if Reuven owns the mother and Shimon owns the daughter, what responsibility of coordination do they bear between themselves to make sure that they aren't both going to be slaughtering their animals on the same day? Section 3, slaughtering the daughter and then the mother. I have in parentheses cows, just in case nobody should get the wrong idea. Akoponim. So the daughter, so of course the pasuk talks about Oso v'Ezbeno, the mother and the daughter, right? Meaning Oso v'Ezbeno is male, but we discussed whatever. Without getting into the details of here, mother and daughter is an easy example for us to work with. So the pasuk is talking about also vespino, mother, daughter. How do we know that the same applies to daughter, mother? So we will learn that in the Gemara. And finally, violating an aveirah multiple times in one action. Of course, this is a sugya that comes up throughout Shas, the concept of shtei aveirahs behelam echad. If you do two aveirahs in one mistake, right? So, for example, you eat two pieces of chaylev without realizing, or two kazesim of chaylev without realizing in between that, wait, I'm eating chaylev. So, how many korbanos do you have to bring? One korban chatas, two korban chatases. Anyways, so we are going to discuss that sugya. So, as you could tell just from the introduction, there's really quite a lot of meat on this daf, but good meat. So, come join me. Let's have a great time learning Daf Pei Beis of Masechta Chullin. Friends, we begin. Daf Pei Aleph Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Ufaras chatos shechita she'ena re'uya? Question mark. So one of the examples in our Mishnah from yesterday was paras chatos, the para aduma. That the para aduma, of course, the red heifer, is taken to the Hara Zaysim, to the Hara Mishcha, the Hara Zaysim, and it is slaughtered there on the Har HaZaysim. And we are saying in our Mishnah, right, of course, it's shechted and then burnt into ashes, and then that ash can be mixed with water and sprinkled on people that are tmei meis. Now, our Mishnah had said that the shechita of the Para Aduma is a shechita she'ena re'uya. Therefore, Reb Shimon says that it is, in terms of Oso v'Ezbeno, there would be no violation of Oso v'Ezbeno because it's not actually shechita, as we've learned the past few days. Oso v'Ezbeno lo sishchatu b'yom echad. It has to be a shechita. Reb Shimon says it's not a shechita. There's no violations. There's no potential violations of Oso v'Ezbeno by a para aduma. The Chacham say it is considered a shechita, and there is what to be concerned about in terms of Oso v'Ezbeno. So now, frag the Gemara for aschata shechita she'ena re'uya. Why are we considering paras chatas to be a shechita she'ena re'uya? Violating, we learn in a brayso Reb Shimon Reb Shimon is the one who in our Mishnah is saying that it's a shechita she'eina re'uya. Well, our Mishnah is saying it's shechita she'eina re'uya. Reb Shimon says, therefore, there's no concern of osav as beno. V'atani Reb Shimon Omer, but Reb Shimon himself says, para mitama tumas ochlin havais l'shasa kosher. That a para aduma could be mitami tumas ochlin. Food tuma. What's food tuma? Well, if you have food that comes in contact with, let's say, a dead sheretz, so the dead sheretz is an avatuma, the food becomes a rishon tuma. So the truth is, so this taka very interesting. It doesn't say mitama. Doesn't say that it becomes tama. It says mitama. It's mitame. A whole interesting thing. But anyways, forget about mitama for a second. Let's focus for a second on the fact that it's tumas ochlin. Food. What food do we have by a paraduma? Paraduma is not food. So when it's alive, certainly it's not going to be, there's no tumas ochlin when it's alive, that's for sure. Right? There's no animals when they're alive. There's no tuma associated with them. So it's going to be after they're dead. Now, I imagine also once they're burnt into ashes, I imagine also they're no longer considered ochel. So when would the para aduma be considered ochel for us to be considering that there's tumas ochlin? After shechita. It's meat now. So in that period of time, once it's shechted, before it's burned, I assume before it's burned, so there's a possibility for it to be considered ochel, for it to be considered meat. And it says Reb Shimon, para aduma mitama tumas ochlin, that after you shecht the para aduma, and it's meat, if it comes in contact with food, it will be mitame, tumas ochlin. It will, I assume the point is that the para aduma would be considered a rishon l'tumah, because if we're considering it food can't be an avatuma. So I imagine the point is that we consider the para aduma to be a rishon l'tumah, and if it touches food, it'll make that food a sheni l'tumah. That's what I assume. How come a para aduma, once it's shechted, could be mitame tumas ochlin? If it touches food, that food will become tummy. Hol v'ois l'shasa kosher, because it had a shas akosher. What does that mean? Vam Reb Shimon ben Lakish says Rish Lakish, Omer Reb Shimon, that Reb Shimon would say, para niftes al gabe ma'irachta. That a para aduma can be redeemed when it's on the mareches. What does that mean? It means that, so a para aduma is taken to Har HaZeisim, where my aunt is buried. And from there on Har HaZeisim, they would set up an altar, if I am not mistaken. They would set up an altar over there. They would they would bring, I believe, the para aduma to the top of the altar, tie up the para aduma, and there at the top of the altar, they would shecht the para aduma. They would shecht the para aduma. Now, what happens if they shecht the para aduma? They haven't yet burnt it. And then they say, wait, people. Here's another para aduma. It's more beautiful than the para aduma that we just shechted. Let's use this other para aduma so that we can do the mitzvah more beautifully. Now, para aduma, I think, is not something that's done very often. I feel like I've seen in the past how few para adumas were actually ever para adumad. I don't remember what that number is. But I believe that this isn't something that was done very frequently. And if they shechted the para aduma and it's lying there on the top of the altar, it hasn't yet been burnt, and they say, wait, we found a more beautiful para aduma. So what you could do is you could be podeh the para aduma that was already shechted. So it's no longer going to be it's no longer going to be also bano. You can eat it, and instead you're gonna offer the new para aduma, the one that's more beautiful. And what happens to the para aduma that was shechted, the red heifer that was already shechted and is lying there? You can eat it. You can eat it. You can eat it. Now, if you can eat it, so memele the shechita was a kosher shechita. And we're saying that who's saying this? Reb Shimon's saying this. So Reb Shimon, the champion of shechita she'eina re'uya eina shechita, lo shma shechita, is also the one who's saying what? Again, let's read these two brises that we just read. Number one, Reb Shimon Omer, says Reb Shimon, that that the para aduma can be mitama tumas ochlin since it had a shasa kosher, a period where it could be eaten. When could it have been eaten? Well, if it was shechted at the top of the, right, we said, Omer Rib Shimon, if it was shechted and now it's at the top of the altar, you could be poded if you find a nicer paraduma. So because there's the potential to be poded the paraduma, we'll say liftos kipari dummy, if I said that correctly. Anyways, so we're gonna so therefore, since there's the potential to be poded the paraduma once it's already been shechted, so because there's that potential, and then if you would have redeemed that paraduma, then it would be right in favor of a different paraduma. It would be have a shasa kosher. It would be kosher meat that you can eat. So therefore, that's why we say that paraduma even when it hasn't been redeemed, right? Because what does it say? Right? Omid liftos kipari dami. Anything that even stands to be poded, that has the potential to be poded, we could view it as if it has been poded. And that is why a paraduma could be mitame tumas ochlin, because there's the potential to be poded and to eat it. So clearly the shechita for the paraduma, even according to Reb Shimon, is shechita re'uya. And it's considered shechita, which is why it has a shasa kosher. So clearly then, paraduma, there's a why is it in our Mishnah? Why is it an example of shechita she'eina re'uya? Amar Reb Shimon bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan, paras chatas eina Mishnah. So it says Reb Shimon bar Abba, the name of Reb Yochanan. That's a mistake. Yeah, you're right. Paras chatas should be removed from our Mishnah. It doesn't make sense to be there, as we've just proven that Reb Shimon, who says shechita she'eina re'uya lo shma shechita, does in fact consider the shechita of the paraduma to be a kosher shechita. It doesn't make sense for paraduma to be on the list of things that are shechita she'eina re'uya. Very, very beautiful Gemara there about paraduma. I'm going to chap a shluck of coffee and we'll go weiter. Okay. Now, moving on. Egla arufa. Vegla arufa lav shechita re'uya hi. Another example from our Mishnah of shechita she'eina re'uya, and Reb Shimon says it's not a shechita, and therefore it's not shaykh to oso vezmino. Another example is egla arufa. What's an egla arufa? Egla arufa is a sugya that is going to come up at the end of Parsha Shoftim, mamish the maftir of Parsha Shoftim. This week is Parshas Voeschonon, Shabbos Nachamu. Then afterwards Parshas Ekev, and then Re'eh, and then Parshas Shoftim. At the end of Parshas Shoftim, we learn the sugya of Egla Arufa. A corpse is found between Hither and Yan, between two cities. So the closest city essentially goes out. They take a calf and they break its neck in a barren wadi. A wadi, I looked up yesterday, is a dry riverbed. And there's a symbolism here that you take this calf, asher lo Allah aleh ol, asher lo ubadba, asher lo Allah aleh ol. From right, is that correct? No, maybe not. Asher lo ubadba v'lo. I don't remember. I don't think it's Allah aleh ol, but whatever it is, you take a calf that has never done any work, has never been productive, has never borne any fruits at all, and you break its neck in a barren wadi that has never been what's it called when you cultivated, to atone for this fellow, for this victim who was murdered and will be unable to bear any more fruit. So now, in Egla Arufa is Asur Ba'ano. And if it's Asur Ba'ano, so clearly shechting it is not going to allow you to eat it. It's Asur Ba'ano. The question is, at what point does the Egla Arufa become Asur Ba'ano? Is it only once its neck has been broken. Its neck has been broken, it's dead, it's lying there, it is now asur b'hana'ah? Or do we say that it's asur b'hana'ah even from before its neck has been broken? So, from the fact that our Mishnah says that an egla arufa is shechita she'eina re'uya, so memele, it has to already be asur b'hana'ah before it's born, before its neck is broken, before it's been egla arufad. Because if it was mutter b'hana'ah up until the point that it's been egla arufad, what's the problem with shechting it? Shechting something that's mutter b'hana'ah would be a completely kosher shechita. So from the fact that that egla arufa is on the list of things in our Mishnah, that shechita she'eina re'uya, clearly it's already asur b'hana'ah from before its neck has been broken. Now, so says the Gemara 4 lines into Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph, egla arufa lav shechita re'uya. Why are we saying that egla arufa is shechita she'eina re'uya? That implies that it's already asur b'hana'ah even before its neck has been broken. It's already asur b'hana'ah. Violating, we learn in a Mishnah Masechta Sota, in Perek egla arufa Masechta Sota. Nimtza horeg ad shelo te'arif ha'egla. If the murderer has been found before the calf has been, its neck has been broken, right? So if before they have an opportunity to break the neck of the calf, they identify the murderer, so what do you do with the calf now? Teitze v'sira be'eder. You say, okay, thank you, calf. You can go back to your friends. We don't need you. But what about for the our mission? It's asur b'hana'ah. What do you mean? You could just go back to its friends. It's asur b'hana'ah already. So from the fact that we're saying that if we identify the murderer before the egla has been arufad, we could just send it back to his friends. So memela, the calf then is still mutter b'hana'ah at that point. And if it's mutter b'hana'ah, then why is the Mishnah saying that it's an example of shechita she'eina re'uya? What's eina re'uya about it? It's mutter b'hana'ah. Again, we learned in the Mishnah Masechta Sota, nimtza ha'oreg ad shelo te'arif ha'egla. If the murderer is found before the egla has been arufad, teitze v'sira be'eder, just send it back to its friends. I thought according to our Mishnah, it's already asur b'hana'ah. Amr Shimon ben Lakish says, Rish Lakish mishum Reb Yanai, the name of the holy Reb Yanai, egla arufa eina Mishnah, delete egla arufa from our Mishnah, because as we see in the Mishnah in Masechta Sota, egla arufa that has not yet been arufad is mutter b'hana'ah, can go back to his friends. When we Reb Yanai, but would Reb Yanai really say delete egla arufa from our Mishnah because it's in fact mutter b'hana'ah until it's arufad? Reb Yanai says, Gvul shamaiti ba v'shachachti. Reb Yanai says, I had heard a limitation regarding a not yet arufad egla being mutter b'hana'ah, but I forgot what that limitation is. V'naz ben chevraya lomar, and the chevra in the Beis HaMedrash said, Yiridasa l'nachal esin osarta. That says Reb Yanai that it is in fact asur before it has been arufad. At what point does the egla that is not yet arufad become asur? Well, the pasuk says that you take it to a nachal esin, a hard, barren wadi. So you have this calf, and it's hanging out with its friends, and it's mutter b'hana'ah. You then say, calf, we need a volunteer to be an egla arufa, and they get a calf, and it's still mutter b'hana'ah. And they bring it to Nachal Esin. Once the calf arrives at Nachal Esin, it becomes at that point already asur b'hana'ah. That is according to Reb Yanai. V'im Isa, and therefore, Lishane, why do we need to delete egla arufa from our Mishnah? We can answer kan kodem yirida, that the Mishnah in Sota, when it says that if they find the murderer before the egla has been arufad, you send it back to hang out with its friends. That is before the calf has arrived at Nachal Eisen. So if they separate a calf to be in egla arufa, but they identify the murderer prior to the calf arriving at Nachal Eisen, where its neck is going to be broken, they identify the murderer before its arrival at Nachal Eisen, so they send the calf back to its friends. Kanda achar yirida, but our Mishnah is talking about once the calf has already arrived at Nachal Eisen, but has not yet been arufad, and then it's already asur ba'ana, and then you shecht it, it would be a shechita she'ein ru'uya because it's asur ba'ana. So why would Rish Lakish say in the name of Rabbi Yanai delete egla arufa from our Mishnah? Egla arufa is just fine in our Mishnah. It's talking about where you shecht it in Nachal Eisen before it's been arufad. Amr Pinchas Beider Reb Ami. So in response, it says Pinchas Beider Reb Ami Onon Mishmei Reb Shimon ben Lakish Masninan La. So we amend it. We actually, says Reb Pinchas Beider Reb Ami, we don't say that Reb Yanai deletes egla arufa from our Mishnah. As we just explained, it makes sense for it to be in our Mishnah. Rather, it's Rish Lakish himself who's saying delete egla arufa from our Mishnah. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Masninan La egla arufa eina Mishnah that egla arufa should be deleted from our Mishnah. Amar Ashi says of Ashi ki avinan beira popi when we're by the besmedrish of popi kashalon mi Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish hachi. It says of Ashi when we're by the besmedrish of a popi we asked, but it also does not make sense to say that Rish Lakish says to delete egla arufa from our Mishnah because va'itmar tzipoirei mitzaira, the birds of a mitzora, me'mosen esarin, at what point do they become asur ba'ana? What are the tzipori mitzora? So of course the Torah discusses at the beginning of Parshas Mitzora. Right? How does Mitzora begin? V'zos Torah, is that it? V'zos Torah sa Mitzora b'yom Torah asov uva lakoyin? Maybe. And there at the beginning of Parshas Mitzora, the Torah describes that as part of the purification process of Mitzora, on the very first day of the purification process, 2 birds are brought. What kind of birds? Usually we talk about doves and turtle doves when it comes to korbanos. Those are not the birds by Mitzora. They're tzipore dror. What is tzipore dror? Well, they seem to be birds that can live in your house as well as outside in the field. And I think they also chirp. I saw in the Ramban al Torah, he says something very interesting. Why are they called tziporim, birds? Because they chirp in the tzara, in Aramaic, morning is tzafra, like tzipor. That tziporim are these little birds that chirp in the morning in the tzafra. Tzipor, tzafra. It's in the Ramban. Sefer Vayikra, Perek Yud Daled, Posuk Daled. At the beginning of the Ramban. On that Posuk. So what are examples? They have to be kosher, right? Rashi says on that pasuk, right? Chayos tehoros, that they can't be tameos. I assume that means that they have to be kosher. So what are examples of little birds that chirp in the morning that are kosher? I don't know. Does anybody know? Akoponim. So these 2 birds are brought. One of them is shechted, and its blood is mixed with water, and then the other bird that's alive is dipped in the water together with azov, with its errors, azov and shnitolas, and it's sprinkled on the guy. And then the one that is still alive is let free. And the one that is shechted remains asur ba'ana. So at what point do these birds of the Mitzora become asur ba'ana? You can't get any benefit from them. So Rabbi Yochanan says, mishas shechita. So Rabbi Yochanan says, when one of the birds is shechted, I think the point is that bird becomes asur ba'ana, unless both of them become temporary, the asur ba'ana. But anyways, certainly when you're sending away the bird that's alive, at that point for sure it's mutar ba'ana. But I think according to Rabbi Yochanan, we probably say that the shechting of I think that's the point. The shechting of one of the birds, that is what makes it that bird asur ba'ana. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish disagrees. Mishas likicha, from the time that you take the birds to be used for the purification of the mitzvah, from the time that you take them when they're still alive already, they become asur bano. You shecht one of them, then when the live one is freed, it becomes mutar bano once again. Of course, we can't have a random bird out in the wild that's asur bano, so it becomes mutar bano. But it says Rish Lakish that already when they're alive, from the time that you take them, they are already asur bano. For a minute, my time to Shimon ben Lakish, we say, why does Rish Lakish say that when the birds are alive already, once they're taken, they're already asur bano? Because by egla arufa, it says, V'lakchu ziknei ha'ir, I'm reading from the pasuk, ahi eglas bakar, etc. That it says v'lakchu, it says kicha ba'egla rufa, and also it says by mitzvah v'tziva koyin v'lakach lamitar shtei tziporim chayos teoris, etc. So it says kicha, taking ba'egla rufa, and it says taking by the tziporim mitzvah. So gomer kicha me'egla rufa. So we see that clearly Rabbi Shlakish holds like Rabbi Yanai holds, that by egla arufa, the egla, the calf, is already asur bano from when it's still alive. At what point? He's going to agree with Rabbi Yanai there. So therefore, Rish Lakish can also explain our Mishnah as talking about the egla arufa was not yet arufad. It was the egla had not yet arufad. And it was already asur bano because it was already a nachal eisen. And you shechted it. And Reb Shimon says shechita she'eina ruya. Chacham says shechita ruya. Salam Reb Chia by Abba and Reb Yochanan egla arufa in a Mishnah. Rather, it's Reb Chia by Abba says in the name of Reb Yochanan. Reb Yochanan, who we saw by the birds, says that the bird only becomes asur bano once it's slaughtered. So here also, the egla arufa only becomes asur bano once it is arufad. Until then, it's mutar bano, and that being the case, Rabbi Yochanan would say delete egla arufa from our Mishnah, because he would say up until its neck has been broken, it is mutar bano. In which case, it would be the shechita, shechita of an animal that's mutar bano would be a-okay. So it's Rabbi Yochanan who says to delete egla arufa from our Mishnah. Givaldig, mamish givaldig. So we just looked at the very interesting sugyas of para aduma and egla arufa in order to evaluate whether or not they belong in our Mishnah. We said para aduma does not belong in our Mishnah, and we said the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Wait, 1 second. We said para aduma does not belong in our Mishnah, and the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, egla arufa, also does not belong in our Mishnah. And now we get up to a small little Mishnah and Gemara regarding when mother and daughter cows are owned by two different yidden, and what kind of coordination do they need between the two of them? Says the Mishnah, Shnaim shelakhu pare uvna. So Ruvain buys Sarah, and Shimon buys Sarah Jr. So Rav Yosef, says the Mishnah, Shnaim shelakhu pare uvna. Reuven and Shimon purchased Sarah and Sarah Jr., the cows and calf, respectively, among themselves. Okay, so whoever made the purchase first, let's assume that Reuven purchased Sarah the cow first, and Shimon then purchased Sarah Jr., the calf, second. So since Reuven made the purchase first, he has the right to shecht today, which means that Mimei Shimon is going to have to wait till tomorrow. And if Shimon, however, shechted first, okay, fine. Kol kavod. Shimon was assertive, and great. Reuven has to wait till tomorrow. So, okay, fine. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Rav Yosef linyan dina tnan. Says Rav Yosef, our Mishnah is talking about if they go to court, right? Reuven buys Sarah the cow, Shimon buys Sarah Jr. the calf, and they go to court. Shimon says, look, I need to be shechting this calf. I'm making a simcha today, whatever. I need to shech this. And Reuven says, so what? I bought it first. I want to shecht mine first. So Bezin says, look, Reuven has the right to shecht it first. Kilu, that's the scenario. If it comes to kind of a situation where we have to make a decision, so memele priority goes to whoever made the purchase first. But it's not like a halacha that like it needs to be this way. If they make up among themselves, yeah, sure, no problem. Shimon, you could shechter us first. Great. So Shimon could it's not like it has to be this way, but if they're getting an argument, both want to shech today, so we're going to give priority to the one who made the purchase first. Tana, we learn in a brayset. Im kodam asheni. If, however, Shimon took the initiative and was assertive and quickly shechted before Reuven did, hareze zariz v'niskar. That is a person who is, how do you define zariz? Somebody who is, I feel like assertive isn't quite the word that I'm looking for, but zariz is zrizin makdim in the mitzvahs. Somebody who is friends, help me, give me a word over here. Louder, yell. It has to travel at the speed of the internet. Somebody who does things quickly and excitedly, and he wins. Zariz is quickly and excited. Shelo avad isura, and it's considered right. Zariz is like it's like tzav v'zeruz. It's a good thing. It's a positive thing, right? It's a positive assertiveness, and avad isura. He didn't do anything wrong. Look, technically speaking, there are norms. The norms are that you would let Reuven shecht first and then Shimon. But Shimon doesn't follow the norms. He's a rebel. And he went first and he was assertive. Okay, he didn't do anything wrong. V'niskar, and he wins. Tekachel bisra, he is eating meat. Okay, gewaldig. What's interesting though is that we do see that there is a certain level of coordination that's required. Now, we're going to see in a Mishnah tomorrow that there are specific days of the year when a meat monger needs to inform his customer, hey, you should know I sold this animal's mother earlier today, therefore you have to coordinate amongst therefore you should wait till tomorrow. And that's only like Erev Pesach, for example, implying that the rest of the year, there isn't like such a level of coordination that like the meat monger needs to tell Shimon, by the way, I sold something to Reuven. It sounds like, so we'd be in a situation where I guess Reuven and Shimon are both aware that they are owning a mother-daughter pair. At that point, I guess it requires a certain amount of coordination. But as long as they don't know, as the Gemara is going to say tomorrow, right, im lohodiu, right, as long as they don't know, so they could just, shech their animals. It sounds like it's specifically in a situation where there is awareness amongst themselves that it requires a certain amount of coordination, sounds like to me. And now we have arrived at a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Shochat pore ve'achar kach shnei vonel. Very interesting. So a person shechts a cow, and then it's 2 children. Sofeg shmonim. So the punishment is 80 lashes. 40 lashes times 2. That is because this person violated also vesbino twice, right? When shechting the mother, right, the cow, there's no problem with that. You're allowed to shech the cow. But then when you shecht child number 1, that's also vesbino, that's one violation of also vesbino. You then do it again. You shecht child number 2, also vesbino, a second time. So you're chayiv 80 lashes. If there would be a third calf, you'd be chayiv 120 lashes. Sheesh. I don't know if you'd ever walk again. Wow, that's got to take a toll. Shochat shnei bonel ve'achar kach shochato. Now that's an interesting scenario now. What happens if you shech the 2 children? Nothing wrong with that. There's no violation of oso vesbino by shechting 2 sibling cows. However, you then shech the mother. So the question is, it's for sure. So the Gemara, okay, so what's going on over here? So this is actually interesting, not of oso vesbino, but beno ve'oso, right? You first checking the children and then the mother. So the first thing that we're going to discuss in the Gemara is how do we know that this is also that this is a thing? that shechting bino and then oso, the child, and then the mother, is also a violation of oso ves bino. But for now, right, so the Gemara is going to say, how do we know this? But for now, the Mishnah knows it. So we see here that you're shechting the children and then the mother. So there's for sure at least one instance of oso ves bino. The question is, will you be chayev a double portion of makis? Because after all, you shechted siblings, right? The two children you already shechted. So do we say that by shechting the mother now, in one action of shechting the mother, you are now chayev for, right, a double portion of oso ve'es bino violations of makis, because you have also, right, but you shechted the mother and two of the children? Or do we say, eno chinami, that you had shechted both children, but when you shechted both children, that was allowed, and by shechting the mother now, sure, there are two violations of oso ve'es bino, but there was one action. And in this one action of shechting the mother, you're only going to be chayev makis one time. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, sofek is arboid. You get only one portion of makis, 40 lashes, but this is going to be a big shaila in the Gemara. This question of, by doing this one action, which results in the violation, a double violation, right? Two instances of oso ves bino, one for each child that was slaughtered. But you only did one asur action, because when you slaughtered the two brothers, that was completely fine. You could slaughter siblings. And now by slaughtering of the mother, memele, by this one action of slaughtering the mother, you're in violation of two instances now of oso ves bino. Are you going to be chayev one portion of makis or a double portion of makis? Says the Mishnah, you chayev one portion of makis. Shachata ve'ez bita ve'ez bas bita sofek shmonu. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, if one slaughters a cow, right, so I'm going to refer to a mother, a child, and a grandchild. Obviously, we're referring to cows over here. So again, shachata, if you shech the mother cow, ve'ez bita, and its daughter. Okay, so you shech the cow and its daughter, you're in violation of oso ves bino. You're chayev one portion of makis. Ves bas bita, but then you continue and you shech the granddaughter cow, which is the daughter of the daughter cow that was shechted. So you shechted the grandmother and the daughter. So that's one instance of oso ves bino. And then you shechted the granddaughter, which means that you effectively shechted the daughter and the granddaughter on the same day. So two separate instances of oso ves bino, the mother and the daughter and the granddaughter. So sofek shmainim, you're going to be chayev 80 lashes, a double portion of lashes, one for each violation of oso ves bino. Shachata ve'ez bas bita. So now here, this is an interesting scenario. If you shecht the mother and the granddaughter, so there's no violation of oso ves bino there. The mother and the granddaughter is not a violation of oso ves bino. But then you fill in the missing piece. V'achar kach shachat bita, then you shecht the daughter. The daughter is the daughter of the mother and the mother of the granddaughter. So this is similar to when you had shechted the siblings and then shechted the mother. That by this one action, in our example of shechting the daughter, you are now in violation of two instances of oso ves bino, between the daughter and the mother, and the daughter and the granddaughter. Sofek is arboim, so we say, like we said earlier with the siblings, it's one portion of makis, but now we see, Sumchis Omer says, Sumchis, Mishum Reb Meir, the name of Reb Meir, Sofek Shmonim, that it's 80 makis, it's in fact a double portion of makis, and as Rashi points out in the Gemara, the same would be true also. Sumchis would hold the same way in terms of the siblings, right? You check the siblings, no problem with that, but then when you check the mother, and now in Mela, there's a double portion of, right, two instances of the aveirah of oso ves bino, so Simchus would say there as well, you'd be chayav a double portion of makis, 80 lashes. Okay, mamish. Now says the Gemara, Amai, why when you shech the siblings, and then you shech the mother, slash also, right, we said, well, yeah, anyways, right, we said that also when you shech the mother and the granddaughter, and then the daughter, we said that there's two, not consecutive, well, what's the consecutive is one day after the other. What happens when things are, what happens when you have two things happening? Oh boy, dag nabbit. I don't know. Whatever. Two things happening at the same time. I can't remember. Akoponim. So two parallel, whatever. So it's driving me nuts. Anyways, so we also said that when you shech the daughter, by shechting the daughter, there's two instances of Osav Esbino, between the daughter and the granddaughter, but also between the daughter and the grandmother. So between the daughter and her mother. So we see clearly that the Mishnah assumes that it's not just Osav Esbino, but it's also Bino ve'oso. I'm going to take a break and remember that word so that it doesn't drive me nuts. The word I was thinking of is concurrency. For everybody who is saying that to yourselves while I was trying to figure it out, you're right. Concurrency, right? So by shechting the daughter, you are concurrently in violation of Oso Vesbino, between the daughter and the granddaughter, and Benova Oso for the daughter and the grandmother. Now, Amai, says the Gemara, how do we know that it is in fact Benova Oso, that Benova Oso is an issue as well, and it's not just Oso Vesbino? How do we know this? So, and if after all, Frag the Gemara, Oso Vesbino Amarachmana, Velo Benova Oso. After all, the Torah does say Oso Vesbino, mother and daughter. It doesn't say daughter and mother. Lo Sakadaitech. That should not, no, don't say that. It is also Bino Voso. Disani we learn in the Bible, Oso Ves Bino, Ein Liela, Oso Ves Bino. That sure, when it says Oso Ves Bino, all we know is Oso Ves Bino, mother and daughter. Oso Ves Imo Minayin. How do we know that it's also essentially Bino Ve'oso? The daughter followed by the mother is also Oso Ves Bino. Kishu Omer lo sishchatu arekan shnaim. When it says lo sishchatu, that's two different instances. Meaning, essentially what's happening is lo sishchatu. It sounds like the Torah is talking to Ruvain and Shimon, and it's saying, Ruvain, you don't do this, and Shimon, don't do that. What's this and what's that? What are we telling Ruvain? Right, sishchatu, plural. What are we telling Ruvain not to do? And what are we telling Shimon not to do? Haketzad, how so? Echad hashochet es hapara, ve'echad hashochet es ima, ve'echad hashochet es bina, shnai machronim chayavim. Rather, what must it be talking about? Right, so as Rashi points out, it's not talking about where, you have the mother and two sons, and it's saying, Ruvain, don't check the first son, Shimon, don't check the second son. Of course not. I mean, each one is in violation of also Vespino, and it's not talking about where, he's saying there's a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter. Ruvain, don't check the mother and daughter. Shimon, don't check the granddaughter. Because again, these are just multiple instances of also Vespino, right? Whether it's the mother and her two children, so it's we could have multiple instances, right? If you check the mother, and then we say to Ruvain, don't check the child, and Shimon, don't check the other child. Of course not. It's just multiple instances of also Vesbino. The Torah doesn't need to tell us those sishchatu in order to tell us that Ruvain and Shimon both shouldn't violate also Vesbino. Guess what? Levi also shouldn't, and Yehuda shouldn't either. So the Torah doesn't need to tell us lo sishchatu plural in order to tell us don't do multiple instances of the same thing. Obviously not. It needs to be telling us about two different things. What are the two different things that it's telling us about? Oso ves bino and binova oso. What does that mean? It means that if the daughter was shechted first, no problem. That's okay. But now we're saying Reuven, don't shech the mother. And Shimon, don't shech the daughter. When Shimon shechs the granddaughter. When Shimon shechs the granddaughter, that'll be classic also Vesbno. You had initially shechted the daughter. When Shimon shechs the granddaughter, that's also Vesbno. But what are we saying here? We're saying Reuven, we don't want you shechting the mother either. The daughter was shechted first, and we're saying don't shech the mother. That's Benova also. So says the Gemara, when the pasuk says lo shechatu, which is plural, we're talking to Reuven and to Shimon. What are we telling Reuven not to do? Don't shech the mother. That's Benova also. And we're saying to Shimon, don't shech the granddaughter. That's also Vest Beno. So we see that from the fact that the Torah says lo shechatu, which is plural, it's talking to Reuven and Shimon and warning them about two different things. One is being warned about Oso Ves Beno. The other is being warned about Beno Ve'oso. Again, Haketzad Haso Echad HaShochet Es HaPareh. You have somebody who shechs the daughter. Ve'echad HaShochet Es Ima. And then Reuven shechs its mother, which is a violation of Beno Ve'oso. Ve'echad HaShochet Es Bina, the granddaughter, which is Oso Ves Beno. Ha'achronim Shneim Achronim Chayavin. The two later Shochtim, Reuven and Shimon, are going to be chayiv, Reuven for Beno Ve'oso and Shimon for Oso Ves Beno. Haimi boile the gufa. But says the Gemara, but one second. Before you make this beautiful drasha that you just made, fact of the matter is, lo sishchatu is simply needed to tell us, don't shech, kilu, you have a mother, you have a daughter. We're saying, lo sishchatu, don't shech them. Biomecha, don't shech the mother and the daughter. So imkain, lichtov lo sishchot. Yeah, but to say that, it didn't need to be lo sishchatu. Lo sishchatu implies that we're talking to two people, to Reuven and to Shimon. If it was just saying, don't shech the mother and daughter on the same day, it could just say lo tishchot. Say, hey Reuven, don't shech the mother and the daughter on the same day. Lo tishchot, you don't say tishchatu. Ma lo tishchatu. Why does it say lo tishchatu? It means that we're talking to Reuven and to Shimon. You don't do oso v'espino. You don't do benova oso. V'katami boile. But still, no. I could still say it's only oso v'espino. But we needed to say lo tishchatu because of achmana lo tishchot. Because if we only said lo tishchot, you don't check. Havamina chad in shrei lo. 1 second. If it only said lo tishchot, so then I might think that oso v'espino is only an aveirah if one person does it, right? So I might think that oso ves, it's really just oso v'espino. It's not beno ve'oso. It's just oso v'espino. So why does can it just say tishchot? No, it can't. Because tishchot would just mean that if one person checks the mother and daughter, it would be a violation of oso v'espino. How do I know that if Reuven shechted the mother and Shimon shechted the daughter, it's also oso v'espino? It says lo tishchatu. So I can argue that it is just oso v'espino, and it needs to say lo tishchatu to say that even if one person checks the mother and the other person checks the daughter, it's also a violation. So because of Achmana, lo tishchatu, and that's what I have to say, lo tishchatu v'afilu trei, even if Reuven checks the mother and Shimon checks the daughter. But imkein lichtov Achmana lo yishachtu. But says the Gemara, but still, I'm not convinced. If all the Torah was coming to say is that it's just oso v'espino, don't check the mother followed by the daughter, and it's saying, and that's regardless of if it's just one person or even two people, then it could say lo yishachtu. Yishachtu. If anybody had the privilege of learning diktuk, of studying diktuk, Hebrew grammar. So anybody who studied diktuk would know that one of the binyanim is nifal, passive. I had the privilege of learning diktuk many years ago, and if I still remember my diktuk, or as really should be known, dikduk, if I still remember my dikduk, this would be an example of nifal. Nifal is passive. And therefore, if we don't care how oso v'espino transpires, one person, two people, who cares? if all that matters is that the mother and the daughter were shechted, were passively shechted, whether by one shechter or two shechters, doesn't matter. So could you say, lo yishachtu, that the osov beno should not be shechted? I don't care if it's one, I don't care if it's two. What's lo sishchatu? Actively, we're talking to Reuven, we're talking to Shimon. We're saying, you two people, we don't want you doing two different instances of an aveirah, one doing osov beno, the other one doing beno v'oso. So again, in Cain, if it was only talking about osov beno, and we're saying we don't care whether it's two people, one person, what does it mean? You guys don't shecht. We're talking to two different people. We're talking to two different people and saying we don't want you doing two different respective aveirahs. You don't do osov beno, you don't do beno v'oso. So we see that there is, in fact, an isser against first shechting the child and then the mother. And now we get into the very interesting machlokes regarding violating two instances of an aveirah with one action. As we saw, for example, if you shech the mother and then the granddaughter, there's nothing wrong with that in terms of osov beno. And then you shech the daughter, i.e. the missing piece in the middle. So by shechting the daughter, now memele the daughter, and right, by shechting the daughter, you're not only shechting a daughter and a mother, but also a mother and a daughter. So one action, two aveirahs. Would you be chayev 40 makis, one portion of makis, like the Tanakama says, or a double portion of makis, 80 makis, like Sumchis says. So says the Gemara, shechta ves basbita, etc. You shechted the mother and the granddaughter, and then the daughter. Amalei Abaye Rav Yosef, says Abaye is Rabbi Rav Yosef. My timer to Sumchis. How come Sumchis says that you have a double portion of makis when you shech the daughter, right? Mother, daughter, granddaughter. How come when you shech the daughter, you have a double portion of makis? Kasover Sumchis, is it because Sumchis holds Ochol Shnei Zeisei Chelev Behelem Echod? If a person sits down to dinner and he has a plate full of food, sounds like primarily meat, and he enjoys his dinner, he eats the whole plate. Then he finds out afterwards that all that fat that was on the plate was actually not fat, it was chelev. You just ate chelev for dinner. By accident, you ate chelev for dinner. Not only that, you ate a lot of chelev. Enough for 2 kizesim's worth. You ate 2 kizayis worth of chelev. And he says, oh boy, I just ate 2 kizayis worth of chelev. Now the question is, does he have to bring a separate korban chatas for each kizayis of chelev that he made, that he ate? On the one hand, it was one innocent mistake. He ate his dinner. Turns out he ate chelev, so he has to bring korban chatas. But he sat down to dinner, or what? He ate his food. He didn't realize, he did one thing. He ate dinner. That was it. So from that perspective, he should be chayav to bring one korban chatas. He made a mistake. He accidentally ate chelev. He should bring korban chatas. But if we start dividing up the amount of chelev that he ate divided by kizesim, and we start cheshboning, well, technically speaking, you ate 2 kizesim, 3 kizesim, 5 kizesim, whatever it is. Now you have to bring another korban chatas for each kizayis that you ate. No, so do we say that Sumchis would say in that case, ochal shnei zeisei chelev be'elam echod, that when a person eats 2 kizesim of chelev with his dinner, and he doesn't even realize it until afterwards, chayev shtei chatuis, is chayev 2 korban chatases, uvedinu delishma inon be'alma, and yeah, Sumchus could have just let us know that generally speaking, that's his opinion. That whenever you are in violation of multiple instances of an aveirah, even though it was one mistake, Sumchus could let us know, generally speaking, that you're going to be chayiv multiple times. And the reason why Sumchus is specifically speaking up when it comes to the case in our Mishnah, which involves multiple cows, separate cows, is to let you know the extent to which the rabbis stick to their perspective, which is when it's one action, when it's one mistake, you're only chayev once. So therefore, since you sat down once to eat dinner and you only found out afterwards, even though you ate multiple kazesim of chaylev, you're only going to have to bring one korban chatas. But not only that, they would even say, when you have separate cows, right? Your dinner was, stomach one piece of meat with the chaylev that was with it, came from one animal. But here we're talking about literally different cows, different shechitas of different cows. And still the rabbis are saying, since there was essentially one action that bound it all together, that in shechting the daughter, you were automatically in violation of daughter, mother, and mother, daughter. So even then, when it's different cows and different instances of shechita, but even though it's separate cows, the chacham still say you only chayev once. So it's to show the extent to which the rabbi said that even when it's separate cows, separate bodies, still you're only going to be chayev once. Even though they're separate cows, still the rabbi say you only chayev once. But Sumchis, however, would say his opinion in general. Odilma, or perhaps kasover Sumchis, no, maybe Sumchis would agree with the Chachamim when it comes to dinner, that you sat down to eat your dinner, and after the fact that you find out that the fat on the plate was actually chaylev, not just any chaylev, but 2 kazesim of chaylev, maybe Sumchis would agree with the Chacham, look, you're only going to be chayev once, it's one mistake. But in this particular case, now Mishnah, Sumchis is going to say it's a double portion of makis because we're talking about different cows over here. So that's the shaila. Amar lei. So Rav Yosef responds to Abaye in kasavar achol shnei zeh sechelid belim echad chayev shtei chatuas. Rav Yosef answers that in fact Abaye's initial suggestion was correct. That Sumchis holds that when you sit down to eat dinner and after the fact you find out that you consumed 2 kazesim of chaylev, Sumchis says there as well you would have to bring 2 korban chatases. Mimai, how do we know that to be the case? Mide Tanya that we learn in the Brisa, Zoyreya kilayim loke. Person who plants kilayim gets makis. My loke. What does it mean he gets makis? Ilema loka achas. If you're telling me a person plants kilayim, right? The pasuk says karmecha lo sizra kilayim. If it's saying that you chayiv makis, pshita, obviously you chayiv makis. You violated a mitzvah lo sase. Karmecha lo sizra kilayim. Don't plant kilayim. You planted kilayim, of course you chayiv makis. What's the chiddush over here? You violated a mitzvah lo sase. The punishment is makis. Ve'odem more so my kilayim. What's this kilayim loke? Why not just say kilayim loke? What's going on here? Elapshita, rather, what's it talking about? Beis malkis. We're talking about 2 portions of makis. Okay, fine, 2 portions of makis. Maiskin, what are we talking about? If we're talking about, okay, so 2 instances. So it says kilayim, 2. Where am I? So pshita beis malchus. So we're talking about 2 instances of. So we're talking about where? One second. Fine. Pshita beis malchus. We're talking about two instances of malchus. Maiskin. What are we talking about? If we're talking uvishte astros. If we're talking about where this fellow planted kilayim once, and he was warned, don't plant the kilayim. If you do, you're going to get malchus, and he does it anyways. And then once again, he plants kilayim, and we said, don't plant kilayim. You're going to get malchus, and he does it anyways. So of course you can be chayiv makis multiple times. What's the chiddush? Tanina, we already have a Mishnah. Masechta Nazir. Nazir shaya shose yayin kol hayom kulo kol hayom enu chayiv lachas. If you have a Nazir, right? What does it say? Mikol asher yetze migefen hayayin. I don't remember what the pasuk says. Lo yishte. Does it say somewhere there lo yishte? Yayin shecha lo yishte, maybe. So a Nazir who's drinking wine, and they say, don't drink wine, you'd be chayiv makis. And he says, I don't care, he drinks wine. And so he drinks wine throughout the whole day. So he's only chayiv makis once. He got one warning, and he went ahead and drank wine anyways. It's chayiv makis once. So amr lo al tishte, v'ushose al tishte, v'ushose, chayiv kol achas v'achas. But if they told him multiple times, don't drink, and he drank anyways. They said, don't drink, he drinks anyways. So then he's going to be liable to multiple portions of makis. So we already know that if there were separate instances with separate warnings, that there can be multiple instances of lashes from the Mishnah Masechta Nazir. So again, what is this brisa teaching us? Elapshita, rather, what's it talking about? Bivas achas. It's talking about two instances of planting kilayim, two instances of planting that transpired at once. He put seeds in his right hand, he put more seeds in his left hand, and he was about to plant them in the ground, and he was warned, don't plant them in the ground, you're going to be chayiv makis. And he sticks both of his hands in the ground and plants the seeds. Uvasura achas, there was one warning and one action, and still we're saying that he gets a double portion of makis. Money. Whose opinion would that be to say that you get a double portion of makis in this case? Ilim Rabbanon, if we're telling me it's the rabbis, the pligi olei de sumchis, the rabbis who argue on sumchis, hashta umahosum de gufen muchlakin patri rabbanon. If in our Mishnah, where you have separate cows that were slaughtered, and the rabbis still say it's one portion of makis, hacha, whereas there's one guy, lo kolshkin, certainly they would say one portion of makis. So who says that it's a double portion of makis over here when you plant both hands worth of seeds? Elalav sumchisi, rather it must be, who's saying you get double portion of makis here? Must be sumchis, and we see that generally speaking, sumchis says that you get a double portion of makis even when it's one violation. One violation where there's two instances being violated, i.e. seeds in each of his hands. Lo, no. The olam rabbanon, really it is in fact the rabbis. So why are you chayav a double portion of makis? Because it was one after the other. You planted kilayim once, you were warned, you get makis for that. You did it another time, you were warned, you get makis a second time. So what's the chiddush? We know that from the Mishnah already. Masechta Nazir. Umilsa agav orche kamash malon. Yeah, that is not the point. The point is not that you can get makis for each instance of your warned violations. That we know from the Mishnah in Nazir. But what we're more interested in is a technicality of this kilayim example. What's this technicality that's interesting to us? The ika tre gavne kilayim. That there are two types of kilayim. What we're learning in this case of kilayim, let's go weiter. We're going to see what those two types are in a second. But lafukim with Rabbi Yoshia, to argue against Rabbi Yoshia, what does Rabbi Yoshia say? The Amr Rabbi Yoshia, says Rabbi Yoshia that when it comes to planting kilei akerem, now there's a difference in kilei akerem and kilei zroim. Kilei akerem is a specific type of kilayim that relates to vineyard kilayim. There's another type of kilayim which involves field kilayim, other types of seeds. So it says Rabbi Yoshia, when it specifically comes to kilei akerem, shechita v'sora v'chartzon b'mapoles yad. According to Rabbi Yoshia, to be in violation of planting kilei akerem, you need 3 seeds. You have a wheat seed, a barley seed, and a grape seed. When you have those 3 seeds together, you're in violation of kilei akerem. But just a wheat seed and a grape seed, that would not be kilei akerem. So Kamash Malon, the Chizara, what the Chacham are teaching us is that when you plant chita v'chartzon, even just a wheat seed and a grape seed, v'sor v'chartzon, or a barley seed and a grape seed, nami mechayev, you're also chayev. So yes, this case by kilayim is in fact talking about where you planted seeds once, you were warned, you get makis. You plant seeds again, you were warned, you get makis. That's not a chiddush. We know that from the Mishnah Masechta Nazir. The chiddush is that what's he planting? He's planting, in one instance, a wheat seed with a grape seed, and in the other instance, a barley seed with the grape seed. And what the Chacham are saying, that's enough for you to be in violation of Kilei HaKerem, unlike Rabbi Yoshia, who says that in order to be in violation of Kilei HaKerem, a wheat seed with a grape seed is insufficient. You need a wheat seed plus a barley seed, and a grape seed, you need to plant 3 seeds together. That is what's interesting to us, not the part about getting makas twice for 2 instances that you would warn for separately. Tashma Kamanir, Ochal Mize Kazayis Umize Kazayis Soifeg Shmonim Rebuta Omer Eno Sofeg Ela Mem. This is talking about Gira Noshe. The next parak of Masechta Chullin that we're going to begin. No, not the next parak. The next parak is parak Kisur Adam. The parak after that is parak Gid Hanoshe. That will be beginning on Daf Peites in a week from now. So, regarding the sciatic nerve, the Gid Hanoshe, of course, right? Al Kain Lo Yochlu Pnei Yisrael is Gid Hanoshe. That we don't eat the Gid Hanoshe. And it's a lav, it's a mitzvah slow taise. We don't eat the Gid Hanoshe. Now, Ochal Mize Kazayis. So there are 2 Gid Hanoshes in an animal. Well, it's actually Taka Machlokas, as we're going to see. But there are certainly, I guess, I don't know, it's logical to me to say that there would be 2 sciatic nerves in an animal, in each of its hind legs. So if you eat the sciatic nerve from one hind leg, and then you eat the sciatic nerve from the other hind leg, so again, Tashma Ochal Mize Kazayis, you eat a Kazayis from from this hind leg's sciatic nerve, Umize Kazayis, and the Kazayis from the other leg's sciatic nerve, Sofek Shmonim, you have a double portion of lashes, 80 lashes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eno Sofek Elamem. Rabbi Yehuda says you only receive 40 lashes. Why is that? It is because Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the Gid Hanoshe specifically is not in both of the hind legs. The Gid Hanoshe is in only one of the hind legs, and the assumption right now is we don't actually know which one it is. We don't know whether it's the right hind leg or the left hind leg. We know that there's only one Gid Hanoshe in an animal, but we're not sure if it's the Gid Hanoshe of the right hind leg or the left hind leg. So now what's the scenario? If we're talking about where they were not concurrent but consecutive, that you ate one Gid Hanoshe, we said don't do it, you be chayiv makis, and he did it anyways. And then he ate the second Gid Hanoshe, and we said don't do it, you be chayiv makis, and did it anyways. So that'll explain why, according to the Tanakam, you'd be chayiv a double portion. However, it's problematic according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv 40. In this case, you should be chayiv 0. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, we don't know, at least the assumption for now is that we don't know whether the Gid Hanoshe is in the right leg or the left leg. So when he eats the Gid Hanoshe from the right leg, or the sciatic nerve from the right leg, and we say, don't do it, you might be chayiv makis. Then eat it from the left leg, don't do it, you might be chayiv makis. Each one was a straw suffix, because you don't actually know if he was in fact eating the Gid Hanoshe. Might be from the other leg. So therefore, since each warning was a Asra Safek, so my time with Rabbi Yehuda, why would Rabbi Yehuda say you're chayiv 40 lashes? Asra Safeki, each one was a doubtful Asra. V'shamina le Rabbi Yehuda, and we know that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is the Omer Asra Safek lo shema Asra. The Rabbi Yehuda says that a non-definitive warning of you are definitely in violation of such and such an aveirah, to say that you might be chayiv makas because it might be the Gid Hanoshe is insufficient. The sign that was willing in the brisa, what's this talking about? Who could tell me what this is talking about? It's talking about Sarah. Sarah is married to Reuven. Unfortunately, their marriage dissolves and they get divorced. And Sarah now marries Shimon. So the halacha is that Sarah needs to wait 3 months before marrying anybody else. That way, just in case she became pregnant from Reuven, 3 months later, we would be able to know if she's pregnant or not. And we know, okay, fine. She got pregnant from Reuven before they got divorced. However, she didn't wait 3 months. 2 months later, she already married Shimon. And now, 7 months after that, there's a baby. And the shaila is this a baby that Sarah had with Shimon, that she gave birth to after 7 months? It was a 7-month pregnancy? Or is this a baby that she had with Reuven, and it was a full-term pregnancy, 9 months? We don't know, Pashut. So we have this baby, and he doesn't know who his father is for sure. He knows it's either Reuven or Shimon, but he doesn't know for sure. And then he hits Reuven, and then he hits Shimon. So each time he hit his potential father, so each isolated instance is a possible violation of hitting one's father, in which there is I believe, a chiyuv chenek. And similarly, he curses each of them. Also, each isolated instance is a suffix situation of maybe you're cursing your father, which is a chiyuv skila. So again, hika ezeh v'chaz vika ezeh. If the child hits Reuven, then he hits Shimon, kila ezeh v'chaz v'kila ezeh, or he cursed Reuven and then he cursed Shimon, or shehika shneim b'vas achas, or he hit them both together, or shekilo shneim b'vas achas, or cursed them both together, chayiv. So says the Tanna Kama, you're chayiv in any of those situations, whether it was consecutive or whether it was concurrent. I'm really glad that I took a minute earlier to remember the word concurrent, because it's come in handy throughout the daf. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, however, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, look, when it's happening concurrently, no, when it's happening consecutively, so there's no chiyuv, misa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda b'vas achas chayiv. If he hits them both or curses them both together, sure, it'll be chayiv, because obviously, if he's doing them both at the same time, so memele he's hitting his father. We don't know which one it is, but in this one action, he is definitely hitting his father, because he's hitting both of them, and one of them is his father. Or if he curses both of them, he's definitely cursing his father, because his father is one of them. But baza achar ze potter. But if he consecutively curses them or hits them, then the child will be potter, because each one individually is a suffix, whether it's his father or not. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda holds asra suffix lo shma asra. So going back to the gid hanashe, so we're saying that you ate the sciatic nerve in each of the back legs. Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayev makis. So we said that it can't be talking about a situation of separate warnings, because each warning would be asra suffix. Ela pshita b'vas achas, rather it must be that uvasra achas, that he ate both sciatic nerves in one instance, and there was one warning, hey, if you eat it, you're going to be chayiv makis for eating the sciatic nerve, uman Tanna Kama, and we're saying that that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that you're chayiv 40 lashes, because you definitely ate the gid anoshe. If you're eating both of them in one sitting with one warning, you're definitely eating the gid anoshe, you're chayiv 40 makis. Now, uman Tanna Kama, who is the Tanna Kama who says that you're chayiv 80 lashes? If it's the rabbis who argue on sumchis, we saw in our Mishnah that the rabbis said that even when we're talking about multiple cows, still the rabbanan say you only chayiv once. Certainly when it comes to sitting down and eating these sciatic nerves from one animal, certainly they would say you only chayiv one portion of lashes. So elalav sumchisi. So rather it must be that this is sumchis, who says that you chayiv a double portion of lashes, because generally speaking, sumchis holds that even when you have one violation by one action that violates multiple instances of an aveirah, in this case gid anoshe, sumchis would say you chayiv multiple portions of lashes. No, le'olim baza achar ze v'rabbanon. Rather, the 80 lashes are the rabbis, because they were consecutive. You ate one gid anoshe and you were warned. You ate the other gid anoshe, you were warned. That's why you get makis multiple times according to the Chachamim. What about Rav Yehuda then? Wouldn't it be Safek Asra. V'Haitana Savrla, and this Tana over here by Gid Anosha holds Ki Idoch Tana de Rabbi Yehuda, like the other, like a different Tana who quotes Rabbi Yehuda's opinion differently with regard to Hasra Safek. Domar Asra Safek Shma Asra. That according to this version of Yehuda's opinion is that Asra Safek is a valid Asra. Desani, we learned the rest of so Siru Mimenu Advoka Vanosu Mimenu Advoka Baish Tesofu, a pasuk that we referenced. Was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was yesterday, Taka. Yeah, I believe it was yesterday, Daf Pe'al. In the context of Noser by Korban Pesach, it says, "Lo sosir mimenu ad boker." Don't leave over the Korban Pesach until the morning. Until the morning. Vanoser mimenu ad boker baish tesofer. If you do leave over to the morning, burn it and you won't be chayiv makis. But because of litin eseyach lo tasei lo mashe loken all of the Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda that it's a lava nitek laasei, that the essay that comes afterwards of nishgeferlech, if you leave it over to the morning, just make sure to burn it. So the pasuk says if you burn it, you won't be chayiv makis. Now, what if the pasuk didn't say? What if the pasuk didn't give you a solution or whatever? Didn't give you instructions for what to do in the event that it was left over? You would be chayiv makis. You're not chayiv makis because we say it's a lav anita classic, because we say if you did leave it over, do this. If the pasuk would not have said if you did leave it over to this, then it would just be a regular lav. So Rabbi Yehuda would say you would be chayiv makis. Rabbi Yehuda is saying you're not chayiv makis because the pasuk specifically tells you v'anosu mimenu ad boker baish tesofer. It didn't say that. You would be chayiv makis. What about the fact that it's asra safek? Seder night, we're saying make sure you don't leave it over. Now you're not right. We don't know if you're gonna leave it over, right? The guy, right? There's still plenty of time left. Right, there's still more time. The guy says, no, there's still more time in the night. It's not over yet. So when you're warning, it's a suffix of whether or not he's going to do it or not. Right, because when are you warning him? You're warning him, obviously, before the morning. Right, and once it's the morning, it's too late. And every time you warn him, you're saying, look, there's still time. There's still time. Right, so he's not saying, yeah, I'm doing it anyways. He said, no, plenty of time. And then comes the morning, and the night passed. So it's a suffix. And yet, Reb Yehuda is saying that it would be considered a valid asra. So, according to this version, Rabbi Yehuda says that asra suffix is considered asra. Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov lo min Hashem muzeh. This is not the reason why he's parted from makis elam mishum da'av le'lav shein bo ma'aseh v'cholav shein bo ma'aseh in lokan olav. Rabbi Yaakov disagrees and says no, it's because it's a lav shein bo ma'aseh. You didn't do anything, right? The night passed. You left it over. You can't get makis for something that you didn't do. Okay, so we see according to this version, Rabbi Yehuda says that even though it's asras suffix, because every time you warn him, he says, no, there's still plenty of time. So, and nonetheless, it would be considered a valid asra. So therefore, based on this, so going back to the Gid Anosha, we could say that it is talking about where there were separate instances of eating the sciatic nerve, and they were warned each time. That's what the Chacham said, Yechayiv 80. And Rabbi Yehuda nonetheless says Yechayiv, because according to this version, he says asra suffix is a valid asra. Fine. But we still have not yet proved that Sumchis would generally say they would be chayiv multiple times for one action. Tashma coming here. Achol shnei gidayin mishtei yirechos mishtei behemos. If you ate 2 gid anoshes from separate animals, Sofek Shmonim, you would get malchus 80 times, right? 80 malchus, 2 portions of malchus. Reb Yehuda Omer Eino Sofek Elamem, only chayiv 1 portion of malchus. So now, at this point, we have already established, right? The Gemara is assuming at this point that we know, or I think this price is even being used maybe to prove that we know, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's stuff, we know which gid hanoshe it is that Rabbi Yehuda would say you're chayiv for. It's the right gid hanoshe. And in this case, you have 2 separate animals, and you have the right hind leg gid hanoshe, which is the gid hanoshe according to Rabbi Yehuda of each animal. And again, Tashma, Ochel Shnei Gidin, if you ate 2 gid hanoshe, Gidin, Ochel Shnei Gidin, you ate 2 gid hanoshes, Mishtei Yerechis, from 2 separate back right legs, Mishtei Behemis, from 2 separate animals, Sofek Shmonim, you would get 80 malchus. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, Eino Sofek Ela Mem, you'd only get 40 malchus. Hechidami. How so? If it's talking about 2 consecutive instances, and you were warned for each instance. My time is Rabbi Yehuda. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say only 40? Why is he only saying 40? According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says, sure, it's only right. There's only one gid anasha in each animal, but you're eating each of those gid anashas, and you were warned each time. Of course, you should be chayiv 80. Why only 40? Rather, it must be that it was in one sitting, and there was only one warning. Man Tanakama, who therefore is the Tanakama who says 80? If it's the rabbis, the Pligi Oli, the Sumchis, who argue on Sumchis. Over there, the Gufin Muchlakin. Patra Rabbanan, the Rabbanan say Potter. Hachalo Koshkin, certainly over here they would say Potter. Now the Shad is, over here also it is kind of certain two different bodies, right? Over there by also Vesbino, we're talking about different cows. Here we're talking about Dafki Gidanoshas from two different animals. So it is a little bit tricky to explain in this case, but you could say, the thing is when it comes to also, one way you could explain it is when it comes to also Vesbino, it's literally dependent. You can't violate, the way to violate it is literally with multiple cows. Over here you could technically eat two kazesim of the same Gidanosha. Right, it's one way to explain it. But right, the rabbis would say, so when it comes to Osov Esbino, two separate cows, they would still say, Yechayev only 40, certainly over here, they would say Yechayev 40, Elalav. Sumchis, it must be Sumchis who's saying that Yechayev 80 lashes. So we see that Sumchis says that even when it comes to one violation, you can be Chayev, right, one, so rather it's talking about one violation, and that it is Sumchis, who says that you chayiv 80 times La'olam, no. We could say that it's talking about consecutively. My time to Rabbi Yehuda, so if it's consecutive, then why does Rabbi Yehuda say only 40? Shouldn't it be 80? Could go into Leizbei, Kazayis. Well, it's talking about where you only ate less than a Kazayis from one of the Gidanoshas. The sign that we learned in the Brisa, Ochlo, Veimbo Kazayis, Chayiv, that according to Tanakama, if you eat less than a Kazayis of Gidanosha, you're Chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Achebo, Kazayis, Rabbi Yehuda say, no, you only get Chayiv if you eat a Kazayis of it. So therefore you could say that it is talking about separate instances, but one instance was less than a Kazayis, and the other instance was a full Kazayis. Rabbi Yehuda says you only give me Chayiv for the full Kazayis. The Tanakama says you can even be Chayiv for less than a Kazayis. So we have been unsuccessful in identifying an instance where Sumchis would say they would be chayiv separate, right, multiple portions of lashes for one action that resulted in multiple instances of an aveirah. Friends, that was Daf Pei Beis, Daf 82 of Masechta Chullin. Sheesh, that was a rather large daf. I had a feeling it was going to be. On Daf Pei Beis and Daf 82 of Masechta Para, we in the first section wrapped up shechita she'ena re'uya. Of course, we had a Mishnah yesterday where we talked about different instances of shechita she'ena re'uya and how that plays out in terms of oso v'esbino. Reb Shimon would say there's no violation of oso v'esbino since it's shechita she'ena re'uya lo shma shechita. Chacham say it is nonetheless considered shechita and it would be shaykh to oso v'esbino. We asked, what about para aduma? So we said that simply should not be in the Mishnah, since that would even Reb Shimon would say it's a proper shechita. And then we discussed egla arufa. So one way to explain our Mishnah is to say simply remove it from the Mishnah. It doesn't belong there because it is a shechita re'uya. It is mutar bana until its neck is broken. Alternatively, the Mishnah is talking about once it's in the barren wadi, but before its neck has been broken, it is already asur bana, and that is why Reb Shimon would say shechita she'ena re'uya lo shmei shechita, but the Rabbanim would say it is shechita. Now we discussed mother and daughter cows owned by different yidden. So the first buyer has preference, has priority in terms of being able to shech first. If they go to court and they say, who could shech first, they say the first buyer has priority, has preference. And however, we say if the second buyer jumps the gun, we said that's an example of Zariz Viniskar, that, hey, he gets to eat meat that day and he hasn't violated any aveirah. Slaughtering the daughter and then the mother. So mother followed by daughter and daughter followed by mother are both instances of oso ve'espino. We learned it out from lo sishchatu. And finally, violating an aveirah multiple times in one action. Chacham say that you are chayiv just once, whereas Sumchus says you're chayiv twice, specifically by oso ve'es bino. For example, if you shecht a mother and a granddaughter And then the daughter, Sumchus would say, you're chayiv malchus, a double portion of malchus, one for each instance of osav as bino. We tried to then figure out what would you say about if you eat dinner and it turns out at the end of dinner, we find out that you actually ate 2 kizesim of chalev with your dinner. So would you be chayiv 40? Would you be chayiv to bring 1 korban chatas or 2? We were trying to figure that out. We couldn't really get anywhere definitively with that. Friends, that was Daf Pei Beis, Daf 82 of Masechta Chullin.